I didn't expect this when I posted about burnout in my last video. I thought we were talking about burnout and exhaustion and Gen X women and a little bit about our history and how we got here and why it's happening, why it's the perfect storm. But after reading your comments, I realized there is just so much more to the story. My name is Amy Palmer. I am your Gen X big sister, and I want to share some of the comments that I received. I want to really highlight them here and talk about it a little bit. And if you were one of the hundreds of women who commented on my last video, thank you. I appreciate hearing your stories. I appreciate hearing your experience. I appreciate hearing when it was vastly different from what I described. I appreciate hearing when you disagree with what I'm saying or if your experience was different. All of that is really, really valuable input to hear. And from many of you that I heard from, what we talked about really resonated with you. And you felt seen in what we were talking about. But also several of you offered additional perspective, additional depth, additional things. I mean, there were some things that I kind of glossed over in my last video, and around sort of the history of Gen X women and how we got to where we are with burnout and exhaustion and everything else. And many of you picked up on stuff that I either didn't emphasize or didn't mention at all. And it's worth mentioning and worth, talking about a little bit. So let me start with some of the comments that I've been getting. This one is from someone, American Swimmer 12E. I think that's what it says. And I love that you're focused on solution, as many of us are. And your first comment there about, I don't think we, the women, can wait for the system to change. I think we can and will create new ways to share and hire work within the female population during child raising years to lift some of the work and share in a way that enables downtime, self-care, health. Excellent point. And you weren't the only one. She wasn't the only one that talked about this concept of, there were several of you who talked about how it's going to be up to us to figure this out. And if there's one thing about Gen X and Gen X women is we are problem solvers, we can figure it out. So it's going to take us. We can't wait for the system to change. We need to make changes within our communities on the community level. And eventually that leads to systemic change, right? So there were definitely comments in that theme. There was also a couple of comments like Little Bean 18464 who said, I'm not at all burned out. Why? I don't have a husband or kids. I have a job that I absolutely love. So I love this. I mean, kudos every single one of you who commented on, I feel fine. I feel great. My life, things are going well. I just want to be clear that I am thrilled for you and kudos to you. And I also want to clarify that I'm not in that season anymore either. I am no longer burned out and exhausted and overwhelmed and stuck. I'm on the other side of that, but it took a lot of work to get to the other side of it. And that's what I've been spending the last few years doing is working with women who are in that burned out, stuck mode and helping them get to the other side. But I thought it was interesting about Little Bean because it kind of nails it all down to what's got us burned out is, husbands, kids, and jobs. And it might be, I don't know, it might come down to as simple as that. But I do think that there's a lot more layers to it. It's a lot more nuanced than that. But I appreciate the comment. Now, these next few comments that I'll share here is several of you. This is just 3 examples. Is it 3 examples? Yeah, 3 examples of a topic that I missed. I may have barely talked about it, but around classism. and that like Ali Zoo 47055 says, as long as the wealthy are in power, the system won't change. They have a vested interest in keeping us fighting amongst ourselves. Absolutely true. Not just on this issue, but on a lot of issues, as you guys know. And Suzanne Wrench 9532, there's a crucial thing that you missed. It's not only patriarchy, it's not a man-woman problem, it is a class problem. Capitalism is the main source of our problems. And I've only in recent years, probably the last 5 or 6 years, started to come to this way of thinking. Prior to that, it felt a little too far left and a little too progressive for my comfort level. But I have definitely, as time has gone on and as I've done more reading and heard from more people and listened to more people, I think the issues with capital, I think what we're seeing is late stage capitalism. That's been mentioned a lot. And Marianne Talamo says the same thing. I agree with so much of your video, except you leave out classism for women in your argument. And she gave an example of what her mother and grandmother went through, and that we don't start out in a cookie cutter situation, but we do have, generational trauma that goes from generation to generation, and the separation of the classes and having classism absolutely contributes. I also really, really love what Marianne said at the end of her comment. If you want to enact change, but it's seemingly impossible to change the experiences or the expectations of others, the only way to move forward is your own internal thoughts. We need to slow down and take time to breathe more and to contemplate before we act or speak. Very, very wise words, Marianne. Thank you for sharing. Elizabeth Blackwell 4552 also had some additional points to consider, which I thought was definitely food for thought. She said there were a few things that were missing that still needs to be redefined. Partnership marriage. As you stated, we are now looking to be active members of society, but still take on the load of everyone around us. Men need to be informed of the level that the percentage of responsibility that their partners take on significantly outweighs what they are expected to do. So, adjustments in expectations. And another commenter mentioned something about what we're teaching young boys, so what they expect by the time they get married. And then the other topic about friendship and community, because we are so overloaded and there's been this competition between women, and we judge far too quickly. And I like this. We look at things like that's wrong as opposed to that's not the decision I would make. So thank you for that perspective, Elizabeth. Never tried mushrooms had an excellent input and insights. She said there are many points in the comments section that I absolutely agree with. We were sold an impossibility of having it all. There is a few things that we really determined how life went for us, a divide, if you will. We didn't see credentialism coming, at least if you grew up in the working class. Many of us believed we would still get hired for customer service roles, administrative, midwives, work our way up to a managerial position, or just that a degree could be used in many different fields. That changed. And those who know the profound effect, know the profound effect this has had. So again, as this has gone into capitalism and some of the nuances there and some of the changes that happened. Samantha called me out because one of the things that I mentioned in the last video was I was talking about the history of some of the recent rights that women achieved. And I mentioned Roe v. Wade. I mentioned when birth control came about. And then I also mentioned, when we were able to have credit cards and business loans. And Samantha, I misquoted the business loan. She said it was the year of our Lord, 1989, for business loans. My God, I was out of college. Late 80s, horrifying, but not as horrifying as the marital grape changes that finally happened in the 90s. So I'm about that being illegal in the 90s. Yeah. All right. And then rebake A. I'm thinking rebake, you may be a millennial and or a Gen Z. I'd love to hear more from you, because you took the effects of what we're talking about a step further, meaning the effects on the next generation and the effects that this had on our ability to parent the next generation. Rebake said, the worst part about all of this is the damage all the Gen X parents have done to the next generations. Gen X's had these working opportunities, and the struggles they faced trying to balance it made them terrible parents who passed on so much trauma to their kids, but have little to no self-reflection of responsibility for the damage they caused, and now just sit there complaining about burnout, while their own children are emotionally detached from them, living in the terrible society they shaped, and are even more burnt out than the Gen X's at an even younger age. And I did respond to you, Rebake. In my experience, I think that there is definitely truth in what you're saying, and it's hard to hear. It's hard to hear it as a Gen Xer, because I know that we have wanted things to get better and better for each generation. So it hurts my heart to hear it. I'm not a parent, so that puts me I have a different perspective. I mean, all I know is I have a lot of peers who are parents who I witnessed going further in the other direction to try to make sure that this didn't happen to their kids. They worked really hard to center their children and give them the attention that they didn't get, and prioritize their feelings, validate their feelings, making mental health a priority. Taking a mental health day never would have been a thing. Gen X parents have kind of led to that. So there is good that Gen X has been doing as parents, but there's absolutely damage. I'm sure that many of us have been ill-equipped, and that the trauma, it does just trickle down, and it's hard not to feel defensive when we hear a comment like this. And this is a topic I wanted to talk about for a while, because there's been a lot of, adult children going no contact with their parents, which is a topic that fascinates me, not in a good way, but like something that I would really love to help figure out. But I think that I really, really thank you for giving this perspective. And I think the self-reflection piece is really, really key in this comment. And our ability to not only self-reflect on the pain and struggle that we've had and where it came from and why it's happened, but the pain and any damage that we may have inflicted on anybody else as a result of it. And what can we do to fix that? We can't go back, but what can we do going forward to fix it? Then we have Yvonne, who, thank you for speaking up for the guys a little bit. I never ever want to sound like I am man bashing, because that really wasn't the point of my video. It really was to talk about the cause of the issues that we're facing now, and really trying to look at it from more of a systemic perspective. But that always, when you talk about patriarchy, it often sounds like man hating. Not my intent. But Yvonne had some thoughts here. She said, thanks for this. We have to be fair. The guys are doing more than our fathers did. But then you go on to talk about the larger load is on us, and it is even on us when we are, and that exists in our generation already, when we are the breadwinners. So yes, Yvonne. It has gotten better, and our partners do more than our fathers did in most cases. And then I have a few who vehemently disagreed with with the points I made with my article, with my last video, which of course you are welcome and entitled to do, and I love to hear about it. I love to have my mind expanded. I love to look at things from all different angles. I have been known to make an argument on both sides of an argument because it helps me to better understand what I really think and what I feel. And my world Gen X disagreed with almost everything I said because this is not you. So I'm happy to hear that. And my reply to you was, tell me more. I want to hear more. You left another comment on this same video saying the video was like scapegoating, which if there's one thing Gen X women typically does not do is blame other people. Like we've had a tendency to take on the responsibility for a responsibility and accountability for a lot, and often way more than we should be or need to be. But if what I was expressing sounded like that, I'm just curious to hear more from you about what do you mean? Tell me more. If that's not you, tell me about you. Tell me about what your experience has been. I also had another strong commenter who disagreed, and the to summarize what they said to me is that I I don't know what struggle really is. They commented on my background, which is a virtual background, saying that I live in a very big mansion in a nice neighborhood where I've been protected and I have a lot of privilege, and that I was just whining, and that my mother and my grandmother and their generations would be ashamed of me whining and complaining about my burnout and exhaustion based on how hard they really truly worked. And I attempted to engage in a conversation with this commenter because the way they phrased their comment was not so kind. And I tried to engage gracefully, and the insults just got more and more. So I had to block them from the channel. But disclaimer, I don't live in this house. Those of you who've been following me, you know that I don't have a house. I don't have a house. I don't rent a house. I'm fully nomadic, and occasionally I get to stay in really nice Airbnbs. And when I do get the chance to do that, I take pictures of those Airbnbs and use them as my background. So you've got pretty things to look at while I'm chatting. Otherwise, you're getting like the corner of a closet in my background. But not to, I mean, that aside, I just wanted to add that disclaimer. I am, like I said, I am all for disagreeing and vehemently disagreeing with me. And I also own my privilege. I understand the privilege that I've had, and the struggles and the pain that I've experienced is not related to my privilege, and that my struggle would be theoretically worse if I was in a less privileged group. I know that. To my core, I know that. And I've come to know that more and more, deeper and deeper over the years. So I don't minimize that. I talked about this topic, the exhaustion and burnout of Gen X women, because I have overwhelmingly heard from this community, and I've heard dozens and dozens and dozens of stories, heartbreaking stories of women in pain. And I was sharing my thoughts and putting some context on it, and that's what I was doing. But so feel free to engage, but just please do so respectfully. All right. Amy DeRay 3915. I know you agree with the video and you wanted to add, I want to add, in my case, I'm stuck with a certain feeling of betrayal as well. I am just exiting my parenting years, and it's like I have come out of the tunnel of all the shoulds. I did it all for my kids, punched the corporate ticket, made all of the dinners, took care of the ailing in-laws. Now I'm emerging from that tunnel, and what I'm finding is the new dumpster fire of our current situation. Yeah, so it's the coming together of what's been happening in your own little world coming crashing what's happening out there in the broader world. And I hear you, and you're pissed, and you have every right to be pissed. And I get it. I get it that you're pissed and you're angry. Hopefully your anger, I don't even want to say, I was going to say, hopefully your anger sort of propels you or motivates you and doesn't crush you. But I don't like that. That's a platitude. So I'm just going to leave it as I hear you. You are entitled to your anger. Then I got a wonderful little message from 12 Steps 12. Jen Jones here, which, as you know, these are my older sister. They're like the youngest little segment of boomers. They don't quite identify with all of the boomers, and they sometimes identify more with us, but not completely. But nice little comment here. I remember that decade. I'm not being flippant. This too shall pass. Only advice, be very deliberate and thoughtful about any major changes in your life. Yes, great advice. Several of you brought up perimenopause and menopause, and particularly over the frustration of nobody warned us, and a lot of frustration and sometimes anger. Actually, Jojo here. Jojo, I still feel enraged that we weren't warned about perimenopause or menopause. I thought I was going mad. I would like to give some context for our older generations on this topic. Even if, well, first of all, they were always taught to take care of everybody else first and to just suffer through things, right? I mean, they continued to do all of their full duties, no matter how sick they felt and no matter what was going on for them, right? And so that's how they were conditioned and trained to be. Even if they brought up these symptoms and problems to a doctor or to any kind of authority, number one, the doctors either wouldn't believe them or dismissed it and told them, well, that you're just getting older. That's how it is. Just, deal with it. And doctors were not educated on this. I mean, if we're lucky, when the doctors went through medical school, they had like maybe 1 hour of instruction on menopause. And in more recent years, maybe 1 day where they learned about it. So it's a systemic issue, but not the fault of our older sisters and our aunts and our mothers and grandmothers. Christina App 72, shamed for not having kids, and the system decided I had all this free time, so work harder, stay later, take care of mom, pet needs, do all the shopping, cooking, cleaning, worrying, plan holidays, manage bills. Nobody ever accepted exhaustion as an excuse to get out of any of it because, hey, you don't have a kiddo at home. If this is how I was treated, I can't imagine how much harder it was for those who actually had kids. The system demands too much of women, whether we're single, married, or with or without children. I'm going to add to this, Christina, that, yeah, you were doing all those things, and you were more than likely actively trying to find a husband, which is almost like an additional job on top of the jobs that you already have. I mean, it took time, effort, emotional energy, etc., because you were under pressure to make that happen. Tick tock, right? So yeah, I totally relate to everything Christina's saying here, and I didn't touch on that much in the video. Indigo belly dance. There were a few people that pointed out that this is not what I talked about in my last video, is not specifically exclusively a Gen X women issue. Other generations faced it. Also, men face a lot of these issues, a slightly different version of it, but I completely understand that. In my channel, in my world here, I speak specifically to Gen X women and look at some of the nuances that are, in some ways, are unique to us. So Indigo mentioned that plenty of boomer women had careers. That is why Gen X was the latchkey kids. Very true. Very true. And then NGL Reagan Gen X suggested that I read Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique. I remember hearing about that, and I remember hearing about it a lot. It came a little bit. I was too young to read it when it came out. It was, I think, sometime in the 70s when I was still a little girl and certainly not thinking about that kind of stuff. But I never have read it. And so I'm curious to go back, and I hope that reading it doesn't just infuriate me more, though, to see how much we're sort of back to square one in a lot of ways. But it'd be interesting to read The Feminine Mystique. And this commenter's talked about how, this has been going on for quite some time. So again, thank you. Thank you for adding your stories, your perspectives, your different aspects to consider, your solutions, like what are the solutions? What are the next steps? I really, really appreciate hearing from you and I'm learning so much more. And I think together we're learning a lot, and it starts to become clear where we need to go next. So I'm sending you so much strength and love today. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for liking and subscribing to this channel. My name is Amy Palmer. I am your Gen X big sister signing out.